Good morning. It's a lovely sunny morning now today in the UK. Nice to see the sun out at last. So every month we do a monthly make, and here at New Forest Sewing Studio, so this month we're going to make the Merchant & Mills Etta dress in our Northern Blues gingham fabric. It's a cotton linen fabric. It's a trade only fabric from Merchant & Mills. So you can only buy it in trade shops. Merchant & Mills don't sell it in their store, but they do supply it. So that's our sew along for today. So let's get going. Okay, so the first thing it wants you to do is on your lining pieces. So my lining pieces, I had enough fabric to use the same. So that's why it looks the same. So on your lining pieces, you've got separate pattern pieces for your lining pieces. And it wants you to interface down the centre front line. You get a specific piece to cut out your interfacing piece. So it just wants you to interface down both the fronts, like so. Let me put that there. There we go, both the fronts there. And then I'm doing the sleeved version. So because I'm doing the sleeved version, I just need to interface around that neckline piece here. Now if you're doing the sleeveless version, it's a separate interfacing pattern piece, and it will want you to interface around it, sort of curves like that, and interface around the sleeve edge as well. But I'm doing the sleeves on this one. So I'm going to put those to one side. Now I've interfaced those. And so the next bit it wants us to do is to do the ties and then fix them to the front. So the what do they call it, the inner tie, this one here, piece 13, it wants you to fold it a bit like a piece of bias binding really. So it wants you to fold it into the middle like so. Okay, so that's just folded into the center like that, and then folded again like that. Okay. And then fold over one end. So it does say to do it like, I think it said to do it like that, yeah, and then fold over the edge like that. But I tend to find you get little bits poking out at the edge there, so I do it the other way. I fold over the end first and then fold it into the center and then fold it in half. Make sure you haven't got any bits stuck at the end then, but yeah, I just find that I need to weigh. So that's what I'm going to do there. So I'm going to stitch down, so it wants you to stitch down the edge of there, just one side I think, yeah. Stitch down the edge of there for that piece there. And then the side ties, so that's piece 11 and 12. It wants you to pin your fabric right sides together, like so. So on both your pieces. I'll show you the other one actually, because the other one's got a funny shape to the edge. So both pin along there, and I'm going to sew along one of the straight edges and then down. Sew along one of the straight edges and down the side, centimetre seam allowance, I think that's the same on those. And then this one has a, as I say, right sides together. This one has a shape at the end there, but you literally just fold that right sides together. So I'm going to pin that, and then I'm going to stitch that. I'm going to take that pin out the middle. I'm going to pin along there, and I'm going to stitch down that side. So it's down that straight end on this piece with the, so piece 11 with the end like that. That's not the end you want to sew. You want to sew down the straight edge and then along here. So you're leaving this edge that's pointed, you see how that's pointed there, you're going to leave that edge open because that's the edge that fits into the slant of the top, which I'll show you in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to stitch those first and then we'll apply them to the top, or turn them out and then apply them to the top. Okay, so that's both the inner ties stitched there, and that's one of the, so that's the side tie with both the straight ends. So I've pressed that, graded the seam allowance a little bit and turned that out, so I'll show you what I've done. This is the top tie, as it calls, with the angle on the end. So I've just trimmed the corners like so, and then I've just graded the seam allowance slightly. So one of the seam allowances I've just trimmed down to half, just so that that's not all in one sort of bulk, if you like. So then we're just going to turn that inside out. So I tend to use the Prim loop turners. Turn that on there. Oh, my copy's moving. And then just poke that through. Move that out. And I tend to use, to poke it through, I tend to use the blunt end, but then you can use the more pointed end of it, just to get those, just to point those corners out a wee bit. There we go, let's point those corners out. So I'm just going to give that a quick press. And then we'll attach it to the bodice. So then we need our top tie, which I've just pressed out, like so. Okay, so this is the one with the angle there, and it wants you to position it 1.6 centimetres up from the bottom, and then you're going to stitch it 1.4 centimetres in. Okay, so what you want to make sure is that you've got your 1.4 centimetres in. So what I did is I drew a line 1.4 centimetres here. It's disappearing now in this warmth. Just drew a line there at 1.4 centimetres in from that edge. 1.4 centimetres in from that edge, and then measured up 1.6. Halfway across that brown one there, and then when I line this up here, I need to make sure that the edge of that is lined up with where I've marked that point. Show you in a minute. Just get that pinned in place. Okay, so that's pinned like that. Okay, so it needs to be 1.4 centimetres in and then 1.6 centimetres up, because you need to make sure you've got your seam allowance there and you're not going to catch that tie in. Okay, so that will be there. So I'm just going to stitch that at 1.4 centimetres just to hold that in place, and then we'll attach the other ties. Okay, so I've stitched that in place along there. Okay, and that was to the right side of the fabric. Okay. So let's just put that to one side, and then we want the left bodice front, right side up. So because my fabric looks the same both sides, I put a pin in the right side of my fabric so I can keep an eye on which one's the right side. Otherwise I could quite easily end up with two lefts and no right. So the next bit is to place the side tie 1.6, and that's one of these, 1.6 centimetres up. Right, okay, so 1.6 centimetres up and 1.4 centimetres in. So mark that and then make sure the edge of your tie sits along there. So that's that one, pinned in place there. As I say, it's to the right side of your fabric. So, and then we want to place the, do the same with the tie on the side here, so that one, and I want that 1.6 centimetres up from the bottom edge as well. So 1.6. All sounds very precise, but then it's just to make sure it sits on the edge of your, when you sew your seam allowance, that you've got your tie just along the edge and it's not caught within your seam allowance. That's that one there. So it's worth spending a few minutes rather than tackling it later on. So that's that one there. So I'm going to stitch both of those at 1.4 centimetres, and then the other inner tie fixes to the right bodice lining, so we'll do that next. Okay, so that's those both stitched in place, on the edge there and along that edge there. So put that over to one side with the others. Bodice lining, so that would, yeah, that's because that will be on the inside facing out, if you see what I mean. So that's the right bodice lining. So then we want to get our other tie, side tie, inner tie rather, and place that 1.6 centimetres up from the edge. Yeah, so again 1.6 centimetres up. And 1.4 centimetres in. So just line it up with there. Okay, so that's that one done on the bodice lining, right bodice lining piece. Okay, so when you think about the right bodice lining piece, you'll have the right side of the fabric against you and the wrong side out because it's the lining piece. Okay, so it'll be that way round. So that will be up against you. The right side will be up against you, and the wrong side facing out. So I'll stitch that at 1.4 centimetres. And then we can join the front to the back, so there's enough ties. So that's that one stitched in place. I'm going to put that over with the lining pieces. So now we want to put the backs onto the front. So there's a little bit of easing on the back pieces. So it wants us to stitch a 1.4 centimetres from the edge, just so that we can pull the threads up until they match the shoulders. I'm just going to lengthen my stitch length a little bit and stitch a 1.4 centimetre seam allowance along both of those. Okay, so I did stitch the ease stitch in, but actually I don't really need it on this fabric, to be honest. It's very, I think if you've got a thicker weight fabric, you might need that to ease it in, but I'm finding that I don't on this. So just join both ends. And shoulder, and then pretty much line up, as I say. But there's a little bit of give on this fabric, so that's probably how it's easy to do. So I'm going to stitch those at 1.5 centimetres, and then we just need to do the same thing to the lining, but I'll stitch these first. Okay, so I've stitched those seams and pressed those seams open. Okay, I did go, I did overlock my edges just for longevity. It's lined, so you don't necessarily need to do that, but it's just something I prefer to do. So I had already done those, but if you wanted to, you could quite easily do them now. Yeah, and then I've just pressed those open. Okay. I'm just going to take these pins out of my right side of my fabric now, because I don't need those. I can clearly see which is the right. Now it's attached and I've got seams, so I'm going to take those out. So I put that to one side for a minute. Okay, and then we've got the lining pieces, so just move that out of the way. And that out of the way. Oh, I've got one more bit over there. So again, right sides together. So we're just going to line up the shoulder seam along there. Shoulder seam along there. As I say, if you need to do your ease stitch for this again, then you can, but I found I didn't need to. depends on the weight of your fabric. Your edge here will stick out slightly because you've got to think about where your seam allowance is going to finish when you sew it, and you want your seam allowance, you want those edges to join up at your seam allowance. That's that one. Everyone's out cutting the grass today because it's nice. Oh, it's nice. We have to make the most of it, don't we? I did get ours done at the weekend. There we go. So I'm going to stitch both of those at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance and press the seams open, and then we join the lining and the bodice together. Okay, so I've stitched both those shoulder seams. Now I tend to, then when you press them open, you get these sticky out bits into here. I think to join it together, particularly if you're learning, then it's getting it all lined up, it's easier just to trim those back, just to where the edge of your fabric is. So then we need to join the two together around the neckline. So I'm going to lift that up, put this one down. It'll be easiest to show you. I think so. That's like that. I'll trim these off as well. It's just your seam allowance that's sticking out, that's all. Right. Oh, get these ties out of the way. Okay, so that's our bodice there. I'm just going to see if I can raise the camera up a bit so you can see it easy. Okay, so that's a little bit better. Hopefully you can see a bit clearer. So that's the outer piece of the bodice, and then this is the lining. So we're going to put it right sides together, like so. Join it at the shoulder seams, pin it at the shoulder seams first there. And again on that side. Down the front edge here. So your tie will be sandwiched between those two layers. Just make sure it's set nice and flat. A couple of notches there, so make sure they are lined up, which they are. That one. And do the same with that side, making sure we've got that sandwiched in between that tie. Little dog Molly's just come to the door to say hello. expect you've seen our little cat. She likes to do a bit of photo bombing while we're trying to do some pictures. She likes to get in a photo. She's a very homely cat, so she's always around. So put all that in place. That's those two sides done. So we've made sure we've got those ties sandwiched in between. And then we just need to do this back neck piece here. So just make sure those two line up at the top there. And I'm literally just going to stitch all the way around the edge here. Just get that a bit more lined up, a bit better lined up. That's it. Okay, so we're going to stitch all the way around the edge. So that's like that. We're going to get that stitched all the way around the edge. Is that a normal seam now? So let me just have a look. Bodice 2. Yeah, so it doesn't say anything different. So 1.5 centimetre seam allowance all the way around that edge there. And then we're going to clip into the seams, trim some of the seam allowance and clip into the curves. And then we need to press it towards the lining and then understitch it. So I'll show you that next. Okay, so I've just trimmed down I've stitched around there, 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, and then I've just trimmed down, graded the interfaced lining side of the seam. And then you just need to, so you don't need to clip into the edge down here that's straight down the sides, but there is a curve here, a slight curve here, and the neckline here. So that's where we need to clip in. I'm going to have to turn it round because I can't clip backwards. Move that out of the way. So you're just going to need to give that a snip. Folding, I'm going to snip it like that. Trim away any of these corners just to get rid of some of the bulk on the seams if you want, like so. Okay, make sure I'm right. Right, so I'm just going to give it a press, and so we want the seam allowance to be towards the lining side, and then we're going to understitch round. So I'll press it first and then I'll show you the understitching. Okay, so we've got the seam allowance all pressed towards the lining side. Okay, so from the right side, on your lining piece, now mine looks both the same, but this is my lining piece this side. Okay, so on your lining side, you're just going to position it so that you're going to stitch just a couple of millimeters away from that seam allowance. Let's try and get a position without knocking the stand over. Okay, okay. Let's put that down. The back stitches. Make sure you keep your ties over to the right side. Ooh, checks make your eyes go a bit too low. It's just you're so trying to concentrate where your seam is. Ooh, a bit close there. Just to come over a bit. That's it. Regular thread. So that's your understitching. Okay, so it's just down along that edge there. So then when we press it, that edge will naturally, your lining piece will naturally fold underneath. So it gives a nice edge on the outer piece of your fabric. Okay, so I'm going to go and give that a press. Okay, so that's that all stitched round. That's it that way. Okay, so that's all stitched round like so. Okay, so next it wants us, because I'm doing the sleeved version, it wants me to stitch the side seams. So I'm going to get those two together, so right sides together. Oops, tie inside. Show you on one side. So just right sides together, like so. On the other side of that tie. Just with that tie actually. There we go. So that's once you just do your, so that's the lining piece and also the outer piece. So right sides together again. So I'm going to stitch all those at a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance and press those seams open. Then I think it wants us to baste around those sleeve edges. Yeah. That's our basic bodice piece done. So yeah, so you want your, think about it like that, you want your side seam from your bodice front and the side seam from your bodice back. So then the other side seam is over there. Just make sure those ties are tucked inside. I'll show you those as well. ends there. Okay, so that's that side seam, and then lastly we just want the other side of the lining side seam. So again, right sides together. So you've got both side seams of the lining, and then both side seams of the main bodice. I'll try and show you in a minute what it looks like pinned. I'll show you what it looks like sewn. So it looks a bit complicated. So that's your shoulder seams up there, and then we're just pinning together your side seams here and here. Okay, so that's your, as I say, that's your side seams sewn at the back, and then your side seams sewn at the back on your lining like that. Maybe it's easier to see it like that. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to stitch all those, press the seams open, and then we just need to have it all the right way out, and then just base stitch around the arm size seam, around the armhole seam. So I'll show you that. Okay, so we've sewn those side seams and pressed them open, then turned it all to the right way. So what we want to do now is just to line up and pin and base stitch our arm size seam together, ready to put the sleeve in. Now it does say next, after you've basted this, to do the skirt piece, and then it tells you to do the sleeve later on for the sleeved version, but I'm going to do the sleeve now. I think it's easier to do the sleeve once you haven't got all the skirt, inserting the sleeve, once you haven't got all the skirt and everything attached as well. Just easier, just less fabric to sort of manhandle at your machine, really, isn't it? So I'm just going to pin this other one. So just lining up those edges. So line, first of all, line your shoulder seam up and line your under. So line the shoulder seams up together, then line the side seams up, and then you've got a notch at the front and a double notch at the back. So line those up as well. Pin that all in place, matching the edges together. Turn that round. As I said, you've got a double notch on this side somewhere. Yep, there we are. So that should be on both layers, on your lining piece and your outer bodice. So you can match those up there. So we're just going to base stitch this in place. I'm just going to use a long stitch, then if any does show outside of my seam allowance when I sew the sleeve on, then they can be easily removed. So I just lengthen my stitch to about 5, I think is where it goes to, is the maximum on my machine. So that one's coming out. So, oh, get back in there. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to stitch those, base stitch those in place. And then, as I say, I am going to put the sleeve in, which doesn't tell you to do that till right at the end when you've got all the skirt and everything attached, but I think that'd be easier to do now. So we're going to do the sleeve next. So I'll just base these in place, okay, and then we'll do the sleeves. Okay, so that's the front done. So the sleeves, just overlocked the edges of the side seam of the sleeve, and then stitch those together, 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, and then it wants you to put 2 rows to get the easing in, but I've got nice strong thread, and I think I'll be fine with the 1 row round their sleeve head. It's not a gather, it's just easing it in, it looks like. So yeah, so I've done that there. So just used a long stitch, so just from the single notch past the notch at the top and round to the double notch on the other side. And then I've also done the hem, so pressed it up 1.5 centimetres and then turned it up another 3 centimetres. So that's, you've got a notch marked on your pattern piece where the turn up on your hem is, so just there. Okay, so that turns up like so, and I've given that a press, and then I've stitched that round on the other one, So I'm just going to stitch around there, and then I'm going to turn it up again, which I have on this one. So I stitched it round initially there, and then I've just turned it over again, just so that it covers that stitch line and just gives it, the sleeves were just a little bit longer than I wanted, and I think I quite like a turn up on the sleeve just to give it a bit of interest. May put a button or something on the end there, I don't know. But yeah, and then I've just, so once I've turned it up, I've just stitched in the ditch along that seam there, and then just stitched there just to secure that turn up in place. You don't have to secure it, but I prefer it not to keep folding down. You can just secure it there if you want, or just put a little tiny stitch at the end there. I just decided to stitch along there. So that's that. So I'll do that other sleeve in a minute, but meanwhile we'll put the sleeve into here, into the bodice on this one. So we want to turn it, the bodice, the wrong side out, which I know is difficult because mine looks the same either way. But that's the wrong side out. I can see my under stitching around here. And then we want the sleeve the right way out. So I'll do the one I've done the hem on. Single notch front, that side. Okay, so so your sleeve the right way out inside your bodice, that's the wrong way out. Pin it so your under sleeve seam to the side seam. In between to get them lined up. So this is where it's helpful now that you've basted those your bodice pieces together, because it just helps, otherwise you'd have 3 layers to sort of line up, but those naturally sit together now. And you've got a double notch on the back of your sleeve, so line that up there. Lovely day out there. So outside a cup of tea just now, I think I cooked myself. So right, and then the top one here, you've got a notch there, and that notch on your sleeve head joins the shoulder seam at the top there. So pin that in place. Okay, then just got this bit to fit into the sleeve head. So if you get one of your threads, I can find it. There we go. Just give that a little bit of a tug just to get some ease. So you don't want it gathered, you just want the ease pulled up slightly. And that will fit in easier. You want quite a few pins fitting in a sleeve. If you don't like too many pins like that, and you can stitch it like that, I'm happy to stitch it and remove them as I go. Some people prefer to tack it in first. That's absolutely fine. You can also then sort of, you know, just turn it out the right way and just check you're quite happy with it. So then the same on this side, we need to get that into that bit there. So we're going to pull up the bobbin thread just around there. Just, we don't want it gathered, we just want the ease in there. Make sure it's not gathering. A couple of areas it is. Let's get that out. Pin this well around here because there's a little bit of ease to get in. So that's all pinned in place, okay, around there. So I'm going to stitch that around and then just check that I'm happy with the fit, I've got no puckers, and then I'll overlock around it. And I'll do the same with the other sleeve. And then we will do the skirt piece. Okay. Okay, so the right way around. Okay, so that's the sleeves sewn in. Okay, so they're now all sewn in. So I've sewn them in and then just overlocked around to neaten the edges there. So you can either zigzag on your machine or you could bias bind them. Yeah, so just neaten the edges there. Okay, so put that to one side now. Now we need to work on the skirt piece. So first of all, I mean, in the instructions it does say do the skirt piece and then the sleeves, but it's definitely easier to do the sleeves when you haven't got a load more fabrics. There's quite a lot of fabric in the skirt, so you haven't got all that fabric added to it as well. So let's just get the right side of my fabric, which is that side. Okay, so if you've had a narrower fabric, then it does get you to stitch your centre back seam. So you have got the option of that on your pattern piece if it's a narrower fabric and you can't get your back piece out of one, you know, joined in one width on the fold. But I managed to, so I haven't got to do the back seam. So next, it's attaching your pockets. So there's some pocket placement bits here, which is really easy to see on this pattern. And you just line them up. So that one to there. Pin, the little ones. There we go. I'm just going to line those up along there on that edge. Pin, pin. So that's that one there. Now I'll do the other side over here. See now, can you? Oh, there we go, side there. Sometimes I forget to look at the camera and make sure you can see what I'm doing. That bit over there. So it gets you to stitch these on. Seam allowance, I think. That's that pocket extension. Yeah, 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, so that will just bring us in line with the rest of the seam, with the edge of the fabric basically. And then it wants us to overlock that edge and then press the pockets over towards, press the seam over towards the pocket, so like that. And it doesn't tell you to understitch, but I will do, and I'll show you how I do that. So that's those pinned on there. I'm also going to put them onto the front piece as well, pieces as well. That bit piece there. So these are the two front pieces. So there's quite a bit of skirt. That's what makes this pattern a bit fabric hungry. Oh, I trimmed that bit there. Let's just trim that. Do that when cutting out, obviously. Ooh. There we go. Okay, so. And it tells you with these to do your front seam and then put your pockets on, but I'm going to do all my pockets at the same time. So I want the right side of my fabric uppermost, which is this side because I put a pin in it. The end of the table, right. Okay. So right side uppermost. I get one of my pockets. This one. And line that up with there. So just like exactly the same as for the back. And then again, I've got the right side of my fabric uppermost, which I marked with a pin. Because on gingham it's very difficult then to tell which you can end so easily end up with two rights or two lefts or something like that. So it's definitely better to mark the right side of your fabric as you take your pattern pieces off, and then you know what you've got and which way up they are, etc. Right. So pin these the same. So I'm going to stitch all of these 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, just the pocket edges, and overlock them, and then press the seam towards the pocket, which I'll show you when I've done that, and then I'll show you how I'm going to understitch it, much like we did around the edge of the thing actually, so I probably won't need to show you that. So, but I'm going to understitch them, and then we'll join it all, do the front seams, front edge, sort of hem down the front edge seam, and then we'll join it all together. Okay, so as I say, the pattern doesn't suggest it, but I prefer to just understitch my seam allowance of the pocket edge, which I've overcast, pressed the pocket towards the seam allowance. So I'm just going to understitch along here, okay, which just helps to hold that pocket over to the inside so it doesn't sort of come out. It just sits nice and neatly then. Okay, so that's all it is, just stitching that along down there, just so that it secures it to fold over that way. Okay, so that's all the pocket edges done. So then we need to do, next we need to, that's all the pockets attached. But we need to obviously attach them all together yet. But next it asks you to do the sort of hem down the front of the skirts where they wrap over. So the sides of the skirts, that's the wrap part. So it asks you to turn it under 1.5 centimetres, like that, okay, and then over 3 centimetres. So I've done that and pressed that. So I'm just going to do the other one and stitch down there, okay, and then I think we're going to join it all together. The hem comes later, yeah. Okay, so that's the front hem pieces down those fronts of the skirts edges. So then we want to get the back skirt piece, just lay that down, right sides uppermost, because we want to get the right sides of the fabric, right side pieces together. So that's that side. We want this side, that way round. Yeah, so right sides together, like that. You see that there. Okay, so right sides together. There. Pockets line up here. Line up around there. Okay, so we're going to do the same on the other side. So what we're going to do is we need to stitch right from the top here down around the pocket up to here, and then down to the bottom here, and then we need to overlock that. Okay, and we need to do that on both sides, and then it will be gathering up the putting some gathering stitches, long basting stitches, to gather up the top of the skirt to the bodice. Okay, so that's all my pockets sewn in, my side seams sewn together with the pockets, overlocked around the edge. Got a few threads to trim off. Yeah, and then you just need to press the seam allowance towards the front, and then that's your pocket. So then it wants you to sew a long stitch on your machine, so a long basting stitch on your machine, 2 rows of basting stitches around the top of the skirt. Yeah, it does suggest. So, and definitely do, don't just go all the way around, because it'll be relentless trying to gather it up. There's enough anyway. So if you stitch the front section in 2 rows, and then do the back section in 2 rows, and then do the front section in 2 rows, then it gives you you know, some landmarks and some gatherings to go to. So we want right sides together, so that's that way and that way. And we want to gather it onto our bodice piece at the bottom, keep the lining out of the way. So we want those like that. So we want to join the side seam of your skirt with the side seam of the bodice. And again there, the side seam of the skirt. I'm going to pin that tape out of the way, tie out of the way. Right, side seam of the skirt, which is the right one, that one. With the side seam of the bodice, and together there. And there must be some double notches along there. Yeah, double notch joined together along there. And I don't think I marked the centre. It's going to mark the centre at the back. And mark the centre of the back there, between those notches, just to give another landmark to mark it to, really. Where did that go? There it is, and there it is. Okay. Just helps you to get it nice and evenly distributed really. Okay, so then at the moment on the back we've got it looking like that. Okay, so then I'm just going to gather up the stitching so that I gather that up evenly between those two. So, my little fly. The door wide open. So just gently gather it and pull it along. I don't need to do that for a minute while I get some gathering in there. And then up again in a minute. So that's about the right length. Tie it around those ends. Just tie it around, I tend to tie it around my pin there, just so that I can keep it. That's the length. Now I know I've got the length that we need in there. I'm going to find that double notch again and line that up. So I know I've got that even. Slip in. There it is. Okay, I can just even out in between these two. So that's pretty even. Pin that in place. It's not even. It's a bit better. Okay, so I'll put some pins in there. Okay, like that. So I'm just going to go around, do that all the way around, so that I get that nice and evenly distributed. And then we're going to stitch that around normal seam allowance, and then that gets tucked inside, because you've only got the outside, you've still got the lining piece free when we're attaching it, because then the lining piece will fold over onto that to enclose that seam. Okay, so I'm going to carry on gathering those round, just getting that nice and even, following those landmark notches and things, and then I'll stitch that and I'll show you how we'll tuck it in with the lining. Okay, so I've stitched the skirt to the bodice along there, okay, all the way around, and then I have overlocked the edge just because it was fraying and about all over the place. And then it just wants you to press under the lining part that's still not attached. So this lining part, press that under your seam allowance to the wrong side, so that's 1.5 centimetres to the wrong side. And then we're going to want to just grab some pins. Let's fold this out, see if I can make it look a bit clearer. That's better. So this is the inside of the garment. I know mine looks the same both sides. So then this bodice lining piece needs to fold over your seam that you've joined the waist to. So I'm just lining these up, so that one goes there. I'll put some bigger pins in here. So that one there. And then that one there. So that's the two side seams lined up. I've got notches and things, but actually that sits pretty flat, so I think that's fine. I'm just going to pin that along. And then it wants you to just hand slip stitch this in place. You could stitch in the ditch from the other side, but I think it'd be just a hand slip stitch will make it much neater. So that is what I'm going to do. My little dog's just come to see me. I'm just going to pin all that along there. So that all lines up. Okay, so that's the back piece. And the side piece here. I'm going to need to trim some of this away. Which bit? Just going to trim that corner off a wee bit. That bulk. And that can come round there. Sits nice and flat along there. Put that in place. Okay, so that's that side. So I'm going to pin the other side exactly the same way, and then I'm going to slip stitch all the way along there. And I have turned up the hem, so I've done the hem exactly the same as I did the front skirt. So I turned up 1 centimetre and then 1.5 centimetres and then turned up another 3 centimetres. Okay, just so I've got the hem around there. So I'm just going to pin this, I'll slip stitch it all, and then I'll get some photos with it in. Okay. Okay, so this month's make was the Merchant Women's Etta dress. So it's a wrap over dress, yeah, made in our Northern Blues